When new, beautiful thoughts began to push out the old, hideous ones, life began to come back to him. This single, incredibly powerful sentence really just nails our overarching theme for today: the absolute magic of mental and physical rebirth. It's this beautiful reminder that whatever seems completely broken or lifeless can, with just the right care, completely transform. So, welcome to this explainer on Frances Hodgson Burnett's enduring classic, The Secret Garden. Now, sure, on the surface, we all know it as this beloved tale of a rather grumpy little girl. But today, we are going to dig a lot deeper. We're going to unpack the rich layers of history, biography, and eco-criticism that are buried right beneath the soil of this story. We're going to see how Burnett's own really intense life experiences heavily influenced her work, and how this novel is actually a massive ecological allegory. To do that, we're going to structure our explainer today just like a process of cultivation. We'll start with the author's roots, then move into planting the seed. After that, sprouting the story, followed by the garden blooms, and we'll finish up with a Yorkshire legacy. All right, let's jump right into section 1, the author's roots. Okay, so Frances Hodgson Burnett endured just a massive amount of hardship early on, and it deeply, deeply informed her writing. She was born in 1849, and her family was living pretty comfortably in Manchester. That is, until the American Civil War caused this massive cotton famine that completely wrecked the local economy. Forced to emigrate to Tennessee in 1865, Burnett actually had to become what she called a pen-driving machine. She was literally churning out stories just to keep her family out of poverty. She eventually married and built a really successful writing career, but then in 1890, the unthinkable happened. She suffered the devastating loss of her eldest son, Lionel, to tuberculosis. And this unimaginable tragedy just plunged her into a profound, incredibly dark depression. And honestly, understanding that grief is absolutely crucial, because it explains exactly why Burnett gravitated so strongly toward the rebirth story type. Rebirth is all about a character waking up from this state of darkness, or almost a living death. Burnett was a woman intimately familiar with loss. To survive her own pain, she desperately needed to believe that neglected, broken things, whether we're talking about gardens or children or a grieving parent's heart, could truly come back to life if they were just given the proper care. Which brings us nicely to section 2, planting the seed. Seeking a haven from all these struggles, Burnett retreated back to England and rented a massive estate called Great Maytham Hall in Kent. This was around 1898. And it was here, wandering these sprawling grounds, that she stumbled onto something truly magical. A walled garden dating all the way back to the 1720s that had just been completely overgrown and forgotten. Burnett, who already had this deep passion for flowers, actually used this real-life, neglected garden as her outdoor workspace. She started planting roses and literally brought it back to life from the brink of ruin. But get this, reality perfectly mirrored fiction here. Just like in her famous novel, a real-life robin actually helped her find the hidden door. No way, right? She later wrote that a robin took crumbs directly from her hand the very instant she opened the little door in the leaf-covered garden wall. This real, tangible connection with a wild bird served as the ultimate spark for her story, directly inspiring the famous robin, who, as we know, ends up guiding young Mary Lennox. Moving right along to section 3, sprouting the story. So, looking at our main cast, the first thing that jumps out is that we are dealing with a group of fundamentally broken and lonely people. Mary, she's a sour, utterly disagreeable 9-year-old. Colin is a sickly boy who is completely convinced he's going to die. And Archibald Craven is this deeply grieving uncle just wandering the world in total darkness. Even the setting itself, Misselthwaite Manor, with all those large, empty, echoing rooms, really accentuates their profound isolation. Only Dickon, the down-to-earth farm boy, is actually whole. The rest of this cast is desperately, desperately in need of the healing environment they're about to discover. To really get why Mary is so sour initially, the explainer sources highlight this stark cultural contrast. Mary starts her life in the 19th century British Raj in India. She's a product of extreme colonial privilege, totally dependent on servants or ayahs who she'd literally slap and pinch without any consequences. But then, when her parents die of cholera, she is abruptly thrust into the stark, lonely reality of the Yorkshire moors. In this bleak environment, there are no servants to wait on her hand and foot. It is a massive shock to her system. But it's precisely this harsh contrast that finally forces her to learn independence and self-awareness. Okay, let's dive into section 4, the garden blooms. Now, in Burnett's world, the flora and fauna aren't just pretty window dressing. When we look at the secret garden through an eco-critical lens, the plants and animals are actually central characters. Think about it. Creatures like the robin and the fox act as vital emissaries between the human and natural worlds. They aren't just scenery, they are actively driving the emotional and psychological healing of both Mary and Colin. It just goes to show that humans and nature are in this constant, dynamic conversation.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Ultimately, this novel is a profound ecological allegory. It's teaching us about the deep interdependence of all living beings and why environmental stewardship matters so much. It also leans heavily into ecofeminism, this fascinating idea that the exploitation of nature and the oppression of women are fundamentally linked. We watch Mary shift from a life of exploitative colonial dominance into this beautiful role of careful, empathetic nurturing. The book is basically telling us that nurturing the environment directly leads to our own psychological healing and empowerment.
And finally, let's wrap things up with Section 5, A Yorkshire Legacy. Our sources present this wildly fascinating parallel between The Secret Garden and Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. Both books feature an irascible, sullen orphan brought into the remote Yorkshire environment from the outside. Mary comes from India and Heathcliff from the streets of Liverpool. But their trajectories? Complete opposites. While Heathcliff acts as this destructive force who breaks a family apart, Mary Lennox becomes the ultimate catalyst for profound healing. She brings a fractured family beautifully back together. And this difference in the characters is mirrored perfectly in how both authors treat the landscape itself. Because Burnett wasn't actually familiar with the raw, untamed reality of the Yorkshire moors, unlike Bronte, who basically lived and breathed them, Burnett intentionally created an enclosed, safe garden, oasis. The moors in Burnett's book are just viewed from a distance, described almost like a wild ocean. She deliberately shielded her young readers within the walls of that secret garden, protecting them from the wild unpredictability that so fascinated Emily Bronte. It's honestly just amazing to think that Mary, with her signature contrary scowl, she starts as an entitled little tyrant, right? Transforms so completely. And how does she pull it off? Literally just by getting her hands into a bit of earth, by learning to care for something outside of herself. She allows the magic of the natural world to completely thaw her icy exterior. So, to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. We've just seen how Frances Hodgson Burnett turned her own immense grief into a story of magnificent rebirth, proving that when beautiful thoughts push out the hideous ones, life absolutely returns. So look around your own life for a second. If neglected things can truly come back to life with the proper care, what secret garden in your own world, maybe it's a forgotten hobby, an overgrown physical space, or even a neglected relationship, might just be waiting for you to help it bloom again? Thanks so much for joining me on this journey, and hey, I hope this sparks some wonderful new growth in your own life.